Tonight, suspended. An oil and gas company told to suspend fracking operations. Sale finalized. Conuma Resources buys Peace River coal. And encouraging. New snowpack numbers are released for Northeast BC. Good evening and thank you very much for joining us. And we begin tonight with 4 separate earthquakes in 5 days west of Fort St. John. 2 of them occurring only hours apart. Now CJDC-TV News has learned Tourmaline has now been ordered to immediately suspend its hydraulic fracking operations. The first quake, a magnitude 4.2, hit just before midnight on Tuesday. It happened 122 kilometers west of Fort St. John, with reports of it being felt near the epicenter. The second, a 4.4 quake, rattled early this morning at the same location. The BC Energy Regulator says they are aware of the activity northwest of Fort St. John, and they say a number of companies are hydraulic fracking, but confirm yesterday's earthquake is a result of the Tourmaline operation. The oil and gas company, since suspending all activity, not planning to resume operations pending a review. The company will have to take mitigating measures, according to the BCER. They say processes are in place to monitor seismic activity to ensure public safety. It follows a 3.1 magnitude quake Monday felt in Wannawan. Then last week, just 62 kilometers west of Fort St. John, another 4.1 magnitude quake occurred, but was not felt. No damage has been reported as a result of the earthquakes. The Peace region set to see another boost to the resource sector. Anglo American has finalized the sale of Peace River coal to Conuma Resources. Based in Tumbler Ridge, it was the only coal asset the multinational mining company owned in Canada. The company first acquired the mine back in 2011 in a deal worth $166 million US. However, production ceased in 2014 and placed into care and maintenance after the price of coal fell. Anglo American announcing the completion of the deal made in all shares yesterday. The sale was originally announced in October of last year, but was contingent upon regulatory approvals. The mine will help Conuma expand its steelmaking coal production in the Peace region. They've been working to revive the coal mining sector here. After 24 years, they reopened the Content mine in September of last year. And CEO Brian Sullivan says he's committed to ensuring sustainable mining practices. The company will continue to work with Anglo American and First Nations partners to develop the Caribou Recovery Project. That'll see part of the mine voluntarily given up to protect the caribou habitat. No official date of the mine's opening has been announced. Mounties in Fort St. John are asking for the public's help in finding a wanted man. Donald Lee Oker is wanted on warrants for a breach of a release order. The 47-year-old is being described as an Indigenous male standing 6 feet 3 inches tall. Oker weighs 186 pounds and has brown hair and brown eyes. Anyone with any information on Oker's whereabouts is being asked to contact the RCMP detachment in Fort St. John. The District of Tumbler Ridge has announced the date for the upcoming by-election. Ken Klikak resigned from council back on January the 20th, forcing a by-election. Well, nominations are now open for his replacement. Those interested in running can submit their bid starting on February the 25th. Forms are available for download via the district's website or can be picked up at the town hall. The nomination period closes on March the 7th. Advanced voting taking place on April the 2nd and the 9th. As for the by-election, that'll be held on April the 12th. A Dawson Creek roofing company has been fined by WorkSafe BC. Raptor Mountain Roofing has been ordered to pay $2,500 in penalties. The fine comes after an inspection of a 2-story apartment building in Dawson Creek. WorkSafe BC says no form of fall protection was being used or was in place. The workers were on a sloped roof at the time and put them at a risk of falling about 22 feet, according to WorkSafe. The fines were enforced following repeat offenses for the same high-risk violation previously. BC's River Forecast Center providing an update on snowpack levels here in Northeast BC. And some good news for Fort Nelson and the surrounding Liard region. The snowpack as of February the 1st is at 108% of normal. Compare that to this time last year, and that's a 41% increase. As for the Peace region, the snowpack is at 83% of normal. That's a 5% increase from last February. The BC River forecast says, as far as the ongoing drought situation, these numbers are relatively healthy. However, the rain this spring will be the main factor in alleviating drought conditions here in the Northeast. The average snowpack for the province is 72%. Well, BC Premier David Eby and his counterparts from across the country emerged from the White House this afternoon after meeting with the Trump administration officials. The delegation requested a meeting so they could deliver a message that tariffs will cause damage for both countries. Meanwhile, Trump said he will sign an order on Wednesday to impose reciprocal tariffs on every country that charges duties on the United States imports. Judy Trin has more from Washington.
The first meeting occurred late morning, involved the Federal Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who was meeting with the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. One of the issues that Minister LeBlanc brought forward was the issue of the 25% general tariffs on Canadian goods that were tied to Canada's response to Trump's concerns regarding our border security, as well as dealing with fentanyl trafficking. What Minister LeBlanc was able to say was that he was able to get a better sense of the metrics involved in how the Trump administration will weigh progress in regards to that before determining whether or not these 25% tariffs should be levied against Canada. Take a listen to what the minister said.
We now have, I think, a good understanding of their process markers over the next number of weeks. And they were very clear that Canada very much has their attention, and they want to work with us to structure an economic deal that's in the interest of both countries.
Minister LeBlanc also said that he discussed the issue of tariffs on steel and aluminum with Howard Lutnick. Canada's trade and exports to the U.S. in regards to those two metals amounts to $35 billion a year. So it will put a significant dent into Canada's trading relationships if those tariffs come into play as in early March. But later in the day, the premiers, all 12 of them, one premier left earlier in the day, but all 12 of the premiers arrived at the White House in a block to speak with senior Trump officials. They are mounting a charm offensive, as Premier Wab Kinew called it.
Let's use those leverage points to our advantage, along with a healthy dose of Canadian pride, and make sure that we come into this situation and conversation with the U.S. being true to our values.
The 30-day pause on tariffs that President Trump agreed to ends on March 4th. Canadian officials say they will use the next precious few weeks to keep on working to make sure a trade war doesn't happen. Judy Trin, CTV News, Washington.
Meantime, there's a growing consensus that no matter what the premiers do or say, tariffs are coming. The potentially devastating news is concerning employees at the aluminum smelter in Kitimat. It employs 1,000 people full-time in a community of just over 8,000. The smelter can produce up to 420,000 tons of aluminum per year, and it sends most of that to the United States.
It's also odd that President Trump would want to put a tariff on aluminum, because it is a fact that they don't have anywhere near enough aluminum smelters there to supply them with their demand.
Now, Quebec also has a large aluminum industry, but Premier Francois Legault also says it'll be the U.S. that will be hurt the most, since they use more aluminum than they can make. Canada's so-called fentanyl czar was introduced to the public today, outlining his approach to tackling the crisis.
It was important to start my first day here at a working port to meet the people on the ground firsthand who are actually doing the work. So I've met many RCMP, CBSA officers, and as the minister said, the integration and cooperation, which is key and will be a fundamental element of my job moving forward. I look forward to rolling up my sleeves and getting to work.
Kevin Brousseau, the former RCMP Deputy Commissioner, says he met with many border workers during his first day today. His role was created in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's concern about the flow of illegal drugs from Canada. The Prime Minister was in Brussels today for meetings with the European officials, and U.S. tariffs were a major point of discussion. Afterward, Justin Trudeau reiterated what Canadian officials have been saying for weeks: there will be financial pain on both sides of the Canada-U.S. border.
Wherever Canadians are, whether it's premiers in Washington today or officials or ministers exchanging with their counterparts in the U.S. administration, we bring up just how interconnected our countries are. And the fact, for example, that we're talking about potential job losses in the U.S. Based on these tariffs on steel and aluminum is not mere speculation.
Trudeau said boosting trade with Europe is a way for Canada to limit the impact of U.S. policies. And the President of the European Commission says Canada and the EU are good allies and trusted friends. She adds that trust is very much needed in an unpredictable world. Former Prime Minister Joe Clark, Kim Campbell, Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin, and Stephen Harper are urging Canadians to show national unity this weekend. They're asking people to show the flag as never before on Saturday, which is Flag Day. They say, quote, "Let's fly our flag with pride. Let's show the world that we are proud of our history and proud of our country," unquote. And with everything happening politically south of the border, many Canadians are considering canceling their travel plans. Well, now some American tourism agencies are facing the reality of a slower year. And in the border regions, they're doubly concerned. CTV's Jack Richardson has more.
With Trump's tariffs threats and calls to make Canada a 51st state, Larry McMullen is taking a stand.
To have our sovereignty challenged through our history of protecting it is kind of insulting. We really don't want to spend my money there at the moment.
Canadians from coast to coast have echoed that sentiment, and now tourism agencies in the States are on alert.
We're intertwined so much culturally, socially, economically.
But for Thousand Islands tourism, it's a bit more complicated. Their jurisdiction includes the areas in Ontario along the St. Lawrence River, along with several communities in northern New York State.
We really treat our destination and our home as a binational one. It really has an economic impact in terms of visitors who are coming.
Canadians generate about 15% of the revenue for the American side of the Thousand Islands. And according to the U.S. Travel Association, Canadian tourists generated $20 billion in revenue for the states last year. But the association projects a 10% decline in Canadian visits this year.
To cut that back by something as high as 10% is very concerning. It's just tough for us right now. It doesn't really align with what our value system is here in a binational kind of a place like the Thousand Islands.
Aside from the possibility of losing revenue this year, Thousand Islands tourism is also concerned with the optics of trying to maintain that binational approach. It's something they pride themselves on, given how unique it is having the Canada-US border right in the middle of the region.
To know that that could be jeopardized because folks maybe don't want to cross or aren't comfortable crossing, that's going to be a hard problem, hard thing for us to have to figure out here in the year to come.
But many Canadians are trying to make a point.
I mean, we're Canadian. We should be supporting Canadians at the moment.
We're not being appreciated by the Americans.
Jack Richardson, CTV News, Brockville.
Well, the Gulf of America is officially on Google Maps, depending where you use the app. Google making the switch after President Donald Trump ordered the name change. The Gulf of America will appear for users of the United States. However, people in Mexico will still see the Gulf of Mexico. Users everywhere else in the world will see both names. The FBI says it's uncovered thousands of new documents related to the JFK assassination. The more than 2,400 records will be declassified under an order signed by President Trump, but there's no word yet on what they contain or when they'll be released to the public. More than 5 million pages on the JFK assassination have already been released. The United States Secretary of Defense says some of Ukraine's goals in the war are unrealistic. That includes Kyiv's aim to join NATO and the return to the borders of 2014 before Russia annexed Crimea. Pete Hegseth says a security guarantee for Ukraine must be backed by European and non-European troops deployed on peacekeeping missions that are unrelated to NATO. Ukraine plans to offer a territory swap with Russia in hopes of potential peace negotiations. President Vladimir Zelensky is expected to meet with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference on Friday. Washington is pushing for an end to the nearly 3-year war in Ukraine. To the Middle East now, where families with loved ones being held hostage are worried about what happens next if the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas falls apart.
I know there's a chance I won't get to this point where I can hold my son.
Hamas says it will not release 3 hostages as planned on Saturday. It's accusing Israel of breaking the terms of the ceasefire agreement. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says if the hostages are not freed, fighting will resume. It's not clear if Netanyahu is talking about all the 3 hostages scheduled for release or all the hostages that are held by Hamas. U.S. President Trump has demanded the return of all remaining hostages by this Saturday. With time running low, scientists are turning to some very powerful technology to track a comet that could crash into Earth. NASA is monitoring an asteroid which has roughly 2% chance of hitting our planet in the year 2032. And in an effort to study the rogue rock, the powerful James Webb Telescope will help give clues to its true size and orbit. But scientists will have to work quickly. This asteroid will disappear from Earth's view in a few short months before reappearing in 2028. All right, stay tuned. I'll be right back with weather. But as we head to break, here's a look at today's closing market numbers.